Chapter 1. The Invitation to Isolation. Hercule Poirot adjusted his perfectly knotted tie as the sleek black motor car wound its way through the mist-laden lanes of the English countryside. The late afternoon sun, weak and watery, cast long shadows across the rolling hills of Somerset, where autumn leaves lay scattered like forgotten secrets. The year was 1939, and though whispers of war lingered in the air, Poirot's mind was occupied by a more immediate curiosity: an invitation to Blackthorn Manor, a grand estate owned by the enigmatic Lady Evelyn Warrender. The letter, penned in elegant script, had been both cordial and cryptic. Requesting his presence for a weekend gathering of considerable importance, Poirot, never one to resist a puzzle, had accepted, though his little grey cells were already tingling with suspicion. The car slowed as Blackthorn Manor came into view, its Gothic spires piercing the grey sky like the fingers of some ancient giant. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and the windows gleamed with an almost unnatural sheen, reflecting the fading light. The driver, a taciturn man named Hobbs, opened the door, and Poirot stepped out, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the gravel drive. He smoothed his moustache, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. The manor exuded an air of faded opulence, as though it were clinging to a grandeur it could no longer fully claim. At the entrance, a butler with a face as impassive as marble greeted him. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome to Blackthorn Manor," he intoned, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "Lady Warrender awaits you in the drawing-room." Poirot followed, his cane tapping rhythmically on the polished oak floor. The interior was a labyrinth of dark wood panelling, crystal chandeliers, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow his every step. The air carried the faint scent of lavender and something less pleasant, perhaps the mustiness of secrets long buried. In the drawing-room, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the assembled company. Lady Evelyn Warrender, a striking woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and piercing blue eyes, rose to greet him. Her silk gown rustled as she extended a gloved hand. "Monsieur Poirot, how delightful that you could join us," she said, her smile polished but guarded. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Most satisfactory, madame," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "But I confess, your invitation has piqued my curiosity. You spoke of matters of importance, yet offered no details." Lady Evelyn's smile tightened. "All in good time, monsieur. Allow me to introduce my guests." The room held a curious assortment of individuals, each seemingly out of place yet bound by some invisible thread. There was Dr. Simon Caldwell, a bespectacled physician with a nervous habit of adjusting his cufflinks. Miss Clara Henshaw, a young journalist whose sharp gaze suggested she missed nothing. Major Reginald Thorne, a retired military man with a booming voice and a limp, and Mrs. Lavinia Gray, a widow draped in mourning black, her fingers clutching a lace handkerchief. Rounding out the group were Mr. Felix Warrender, Lady Evelyn's nephew, a charming but restless young man, and Miss Beatrice Lyle, a distant cousin with an air of quiet defiance. Poirot's eyes darted from face to face, noting the subtle tensions, a glance too long, a smile too forced. "A most intriguing assembly," he remarked, seating himself in a plush armchair. "And what, may I ask, brings such a varied company together?" Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers brushing the pearls at her throat. "A family matter, Monsieur Poirot, one that requires discretion. I shall explain more at dinner. For now, please make yourself comfortable." the conversation turned to pleasantries, though the atmosphere was anything but relaxed. Miss Henshaw peppered Poirot with questions about his cases, her notebook discreetly open on her lap. Major Thorne recounted tales of his campaigns in India, his voice drowning out Mrs. Gray's soft murmurs about her late husband. Felix Warrender, meanwhile, paced near the window, casting anxious glances toward the gardens. As the clock struck 6, a distant rumble of thunder heralded an approaching storm. The butler reappeared, announcing that dinner would be served shortly. But before the group could rise, a piercing scream cut through the air, followed by the sound of shattering glass. The guests froze, their faces a mixture of shock and suspicion. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he rose, his cane tapping with purpose. "It appears, mes amis, that our evening has taken an unexpected turn," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Let us investigate." The scream had come from the library, a vast room lined with leather-bound tomes and dominated by a massive oak desk. There, sprawled on the floor, lay a young Mydrika system. Maid, her face pale and her hands trembling. A broken crystal decanter lay in shards beside her, its contents staining the rug with a dark, ominous pool. "Help!" she gasped, pointing to the window, now ajar, letting in a gust of cold air. "Someone was here!" Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the heavy drapes, the locked door, and the single open window. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle," he said, guiding her to a chair. "Tell Poirot everything." As the guests crowded the doorway, whispering among themselves, Poirot's mind was already at work. The maid, Eliza, stammered out a tale of glimpsing a shadowy figure tampering with something on the desk before fleeing through the window. Nothing appeared stolen, but Poirot's instincts told him this was no mere intruder. The little grey cells were buzzing. This was the beginning of a mystery. Lady Evelyn, regaining her composure, insisted the incident was a misunderstanding, perhaps a prank by local youths. Yet her eyes betrayed unease, and Poirot noted the quick glance she exchanged with Felix. Dr. Caldwell offered to examine Eliza, while Miss Henshaw scribbled furiously in her notebook. Major Thorne muttered about damned trespassers, and Mrs. Gray clutched her handkerchief tighter. Beatrice Lyle, however, watched in silence, her expression unreadable. Dinner was delayed as the butler and groundskeeper searched the estate, finding no trace of the intruder. Poirot, however, was undeterred. He examined the desk, discovering a faint scratch on a locked drawer, a detail unnoticed by the others. "A most curious beginning," he murmured to himself, his moustache twitching. The manor was a stage, and the players were already revealing their roles, however unwittingly. As the guests finally gathered for dinner, the storm outside intensified, rain lashing the windows. Lady Evelyn attempted to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but the mood was strained. Poirot observed the interplay, Felix's forced laughter, Clara's probing questions, and the Major's gruff interruptions. Each guest, he sensed, was hiding something, and the manor itself seemed to whisper of secrets long concealed. By the time the meal ended, Poirot had resolved to uncover the truth. The broken decanter, the scratched drawer, the maid's terror, they were pieces of a puzzle he would solve. As he retired to his room, the wind howled outside, and Poirot's mind churned. Blackthorn Manor was no ordinary retreat. It was a locked box, and he, Hercule Poirot, would find the key. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Outbreak. The storm that had begun as a distant rumble now raged over Blackthorn Manor, its ferocity rattling the windows and casting flickering shadows across the dining room where Hercule Poirot and the guests lingered over coffee. The air was thick with unease, the incident in the library still fresh in everyone's minds. Poirot sipped his tisane, his keen eyes observing the strained faces around the table. The maid's tale of a shadowy intruder had set nerves on edge. But Poirot sensed something deeper, a tension that predated the evening's drama. Lady Evelyn Warrender, ever the poised hostess, attempted to restore calm. "Let us not dwell on Eliza's fright," she said, her voice smooth but strained. "The poor girl is prone to hysterics. Likely it was nothing more than a trick of the light." Her fingers toyed with the stem of her wineglass, betraying a flicker of anxiety. "Trick or not, someone broke that decanter," Miss Clara Henshaw interjected, her journalist's instinct sharp. "And that drawer in the library, did you see the scratch, Monsieur Poirot? Someone was tampering with it." Her green eyes gleamed with curiosity, her pencil poised over her ever-present notebook. Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed, mademoiselle, the scratch is most suggestive, but we must not leap to conclusions. The truth, it reveals itself in time." His calm tone belied the rapid workings of his little grey cells. The scratch was precise, deliberate, not the work of a careless thief, but of someone with purpose. Before the conversation could deepen, a sharp rap at the front door echoed through the manor, startling the group. The butler, Mr. Grayson, appeared moments later, his usually impassive face pale. "My lady," he said, addressing Lady Evelyn, "a messenger from the village. It's urgent." The guests exchanged glances as Grayson ushered in a rain-soaked young man, his coat dripping onto the polished floor. "Begging your pardon, Lady Warrender," he stammered, clutching a sealed envelope. "Dr. Hargrove sent me from the village. There's been an outbreak, a fever spreading fast. The authorities have ordered a quarantine. No one's to leave the manor until further notice." A collective gasp rose from the table. Mrs. Lavinia Gray's handkerchief fluttered to her lap, and Major Thorne's face reddened. "Quarantine! Preposterous!" he bellowed. "What sort of fever? And why confine us here?" The messenger hesitated, glancing at Dr. Caldwell, who had risen, his brow furrowed. "It's a respiratory illness, sir," the messenger said, "highly contagious. Several villagers are gravely ill, and one has passed. Dr. Hargrove says the manor must be sealed to prevent further spread." Dr. Caldwell adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous tick Poirot had noted earlier. "This is most irregular," he said. "I must examine the situation myself. Surely I can assist." "No, sir," the messenger interrupted. "No one leaves. Orders are strict. Supplies will be left at the gate, but you're to stay put." With a hasty bow he departed, leaving the room in stunned silence. Lady Evelyn rose, her composure faltering. "This is most unfortunate, but we must comply. Grayson, ensure the staff are informed and the manor secured." Her voice held a note of command, but her eyes darted to Felix, her nephew, who sat rigid, his knuckles white around his glass. Poirot's mind raced. A quarantine, so sudden and severe, was no mere coincidence. Was it connected to the intruder in the library? Or was it a pretext masking a more sinister design? He resolved to observe closely, for the manor's isolation had transformed it into a perfect stage for secrets to unravel. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot lingered in the hall, his cane tapping softly. He approached Dr. Caldwell, who was murmuring to himself near the staircase. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot said, "this outbreak, it is familiar to you, no?" Caldwell started, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Not at all, Monsieur Poirot. I've heard of no such fever in these parts. But I'll write to colleagues in London, discreetly, of course." His attempt at nonchalance was unconvincing, and Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hands. Upstairs, the manor's corridors were dimly lit, the storm's howl a constant backdrop. Poirot paused outside his room, catching a glimpse of Miss Beatrice Lyle slipping into her own quarters, her face pale but resolute. She had said little during dinner. Yet her silence spoke volumes. What did she know, he wondered, that made her so watchful? In his room, Poirot examined the day's events. The intruder, the scratched drawer, and now this quarantine. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception. He sat at the small writing desk, his fingers drumming lightly. The manor was a microcosm, its inhabitants bound by invisible ties of motive and mistrust. Lady Evelyn's cryptic invitation, Felix's anxiety, Clara's probing, each hinted at a deeper truth. A sudden knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Grayson, bearing a tray with a fresh pot of tisane. "Compliments of Lady Evelyn, sir," he said, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "She hopes you're comfortable." "Most kind," Poirot replied, his gaze lingering on the butler's retreating figure. Grayson's demeanour was too practised, too controlled. Was he merely a servant, or a player in this unfolding drama? As Poirot sipped his tisane, a distant cry echoed through the manor, faint but unmistakable. He set down his cup, his senses alert. It was not Eliza's voice this time, but another's, urgent, pained. Slipping into the corridor, he followed the sound, his steps silent on the thick carpet. The cry had come from the west wing, where the guest rooms were located. He found Miss Henshaw standing outside Mrs. Gray's door, her face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I heard her scream. I knocked, but she won't answer." Poirot rapped sharply on the door. "Madame Gray, it is Hercule Poirot. Are you well?" Silence answered, save for the storm's relentless roar. He tried the handle, locked. His eyes met Clara's, and he saw the same suspicion mirrored there. "Fetch Grayson and a key," he instructed. As Clara hurried off, Poirot's mind churned. The quarantine had trapped them all, but it had also trapped a secret, one that was beginning to stir in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor. The game, as he often called it, had begun in earnest. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Hallways. The storm's fury had not abated as Hercule Poirot stood outside Mrs. Lavinia Gray's locked door, his sharp eyes scanning the ornate woodwork for any clue. The cry Miss Clara Henshaw had heard moments ago lingered in his mind, a discordant note in the already tense symphony of Blackthorn Manor. Clara returned swiftly with Grayson, the butler, whose impassive face betrayed a flicker of unease, as he produced a heavy iron key. The lock clicked, and the door swung open to reveal a dimly lit room, the air heavy with the scent of lavender and wax. Mrs. Gray sat in an armchair by the window, her face pale but composed, her lace handkerchief clutched tightly. "Forgive me," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It was a nightmare, nothing more. The storm, it unsettles me." Her eyes darted to the floor, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Poirot's moustache twitched. "A nightmare, madame. One that causes such a cry to pierce the night." He stepped closer, noting the overturned glass on the side table, its contents staining the rug. "Perhaps you saw something, or someone, that provoked such distress." Mrs. Gray shook her head, her fingers tightening around the handkerchief. "No, Monsieur Poirot. Just a dream. I'm quite all right now." But her voice lacked conviction, and Poirot's little grey cells registered the lie. Clara, standing in the doorway, scribbled in her notebook, her journalist's instincts undeterred. "Mrs. Gray, if you saw something, you must tell us. First the intruder in the library, now this. It's no coincidence." Her tone was sharp, almost accusing. "Enough, Miss Henshaw," Grayson interjected, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Gray needs rest. Let us not disturb her further." He ushered Clara out, but Poirot lingered, his gaze sweeping the room. a photograph on the dresser caught his eye. A young man in military uniform, his face strikingly similar to Major Thorne's. A connection, perhaps. As Poirot returned to the corridor, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets. The quarantine had locked them in, but it had also amplified the undercurrents of mistrust. He resolved to probe deeper, for the whispers in the hallways were growing louder. The next morning, the storm had subsided, leaving a grey, oppressive sky. Breakfast was a strained affair. The guests gathered in the dining room under the watchful eyes of Lady Evelyn's ancestral portraits. Major Thorne dominated the conversation, grumbling about the quarantine. "Damned inconvenience," he muttered, spearing a piece of bacon. "No fever in this house, I'll wager. Some bureaucratic nonsense." Dr. Simon Caldwell, seated opposite, adjusted his cufflinks nervously. "We must take it seriously, Major. Fevers can spread rapidly in close quarters. I've sent a letter to a colleague in London, but with the quarantine, replies may be delayed." Poirot, sipping his coffee, observed the interplay. Felix Warrender, Lady Evelyn's nephew, was unusually silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. Miss Beatrice Lyle, however, watched Felix closely, her expression unreadable. Clara Henshaw, ever vigilant, jotted notes between bites, while Lady Evelyn maintained a brittle smile, her hands folded tightly in her lap. After breakfast, Poirot requested a tour of the manor from Grayson, hoping to familiarize himself with its layout. The butler obliged, leading him through cavernous halls and narrow staircases. As they passed the library, Poirot paused. "Monsieur Grayson, the drawer in the library, the one with the scratch. Has it been opened since last night?" Grayson's face remained impassive. "Not to my knowledge, sir. Lady Evelyn keeps certain items under lock and key. I've not been instructed to open it." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, his mind cataloguing the detail. The tour continued, revealing a maze of rooms, some opulent, others neglected, their furniture draped in dust sheets. In the east wing, Poirot noticed a locked door, its handle polished as if recently used. "And this room, Monsieur Grayson? What lies beyond?" "A storage room, sir," Grayson replied too quickly. "Old family relics, nothing more." Poirot nodded, but his suspicions deepened. The butler's haste was telling. Later, in the drawing-room, Poirot found Miss Lyle alone, sketching in a small notebook. Her pencil moved with precision, capturing the manor's Gothic arches. "You have an artist's eye, mademoiselle," Poirot said, seating himself nearby, "and perhaps an observer's insight. You see much, yet say little." Beatrice's hand paused, her eyes meeting his. "I prefer to watch, Monsieur Poirot. People reveal more when they think no one's looking." Her voice was soft but edged with defiance. "Indeed," Poirot said, smiling. "And what have you seen, here in this manor?" She hesitated, then closed her notebook. "Whispers, monsieur. Not just in the hallways, but in glances, in silences. Felix is afraid of something. And Lady Evelyn, she's hiding more than she admits." Before Poirot could press further, Felix himself entered, his face flushed. "Beatrice, you're wanted in the garden," he said curtly. "Aunt Evelyn's planning some activity to lift our spirits." His tone suggested no such thing was possible. As Beatrice left, Poirot seized the moment. "Monsieur Warrender, you seem troubled. The quarantine, perhaps. Or is it the intruder from last night?" Felix's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you mean. It's just this place. It gets under your skin." He turned away, but not before Poirot glimpsed fear in his eyes. The day wore on, the manor's atmosphere growing heavier. Poirot overheard snippets of conversation. Clara questioning Dr. Caldwell about the fever's symptoms, Major Thorne arguing with Lady Evelyn about contacting the authorities. Each interaction was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. That evening, as the guests gathered for tea, a commotion erupted outside. Grayson rushed in, his composure shattered. "My lady, it's the groundskeeper. He's found something in the garden, a glove, near the library window. It's not one of ours." The room fell silent, all eyes on Lady Evelyn. She rose, her face pale. "Show me," she said, her voice steady but strained. Poirot followed the group to the garden, where the glove lay on a stone bench. A man's leather glove, worn but expensive, with a faint monogram. R.T. Major Thorne's face reddened. "Ridiculous! I've never seen it before," he blustered, but his limp seemed more pronounced as he turned away. Clara whispered to Poirot, "R.T. Reginald Thorne? Convenient, don't you think?" Poirot said nothing, but his mind was alight. The glove was a clue, but was it a genuine one, or a plant to deflect suspicion? As night fell, the manor's hallways seemed to whisper with secrets. Poirot retired to his room, his thoughts a whirl of connections. The glove, the scratched drawer, Mrs. Gray's cry, Felix's fear. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The quarantine had trapped them all, but it had also trapped a truth that was beginning to stir. Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, for the shadows of Blackthorn Manor were growing darker, and the next revelation was not far off. Chapter 4. The Midnight Confession. The storm had retreated, leaving Blackthorn Manor cloaked in an uneasy stillness, broken only by the occasional creak of its ancient timbers. Hercule Poirot sat by the window in his room, the moonlight casting a silver glow over his meticulous notes. The glove with the monogram R.T., the scratched drawer in the library, Mrs. Gray's stifled cry and Felix Warrender's palpable fear. These fragments of the puzzle danced in his mind, each demanding its place in the greater design. The quarantine, now in its second day, had tightened its grip on the manor, and Poirot sensed that the truth, like a caged bird, was straining to break free. A soft knock at his door startled him from his reverie. It was near midnight, an hour when honest folk should be abed. Poirot adjusted his dressing gown and opened the door to find Miss Beatrice Lyle, her face pale, her eyes wide with urgency. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, glancing down the darkened corridor, "I must speak with you. It's important." "Entrez, mademoiselle," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair. "At this hour, a visit is rarely without significance. Speak, and Hercule Poirot will listen." Beatrice sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I couldn't sleep," she began, her voice low. "Not after the glove, not after everything. There's something you need to know, something I overheard tonight." She paused, as if weighing the cost of her words. "It's about Felix. He was in the library after dinner, speaking with Lady Evelyn. They thought they were alone." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "And what, mademoiselle, did they discuss?" Beatrice swallowed, her fingers twisting a loose thread on her shawl. "Felix was pleading with her. He said, 'You can't keep it hidden forever, Aunt. If it comes out, it'll ruin us.' Lady Evelyn told him to be quiet, that no one must know, not yet. She mentioned a letter, one that could destroy everything. I couldn't hear more. They moved out of earshot." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A letter, you say? Most intriguing. And where were you, mademoiselle, to overhear such a conversation?" Beatrice flushed. "I was in the alcove by the library stairs. I often sit there to sketch. It's quiet, out of the way. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A letter hidden and dangerous was precisely the kind of secret that could unravel the manor's mysteries. "You have done well to tell me, Mademoiselle Lyle. But tell me, why come to Poirot now, in the dead of night?" Her eyes met his, steady despite her evident fear. "Because I don't trust anyone else here. Not Felix, not Lady Evelyn, not even Clara with her endless questions. You see things others miss. If there's a secret in this house, you'll find it." Poirot inclined his head. "Your confidence is appreciated. Rest assured, the little grey cells are at work. Now, return to your room, and speak of this to no one." As Beatrice slipped away, Poirot paced his room, the pieces of the puzzle shifting. A letter, a scratched drawer, a monogrammed glove. Each pointed to a secret Lady Evelyn was desperate to conceal. But what was its nature, and who else knew of it? His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a muffled thud from the corridor. Slipping on his shoes, Poirot stepped into the hallway, his cane in hand. The manor was dark, save for the flicker of a single gas lamp at the far end. He moved silently, his senses alert, following the sound to the west wing, where the guest rooms were located. Near Dr. Caldwell's door, he found the source. A small silver cigarette case, lying on the carpet as if dropped in haste. Poirot picked it up, noting the initials SC engraved on its surface. The doctor, it seemed, was not as careful as he believed. Poirot pocketed the case, intending to return it later, and to observe Caldwell's reaction. As he turned to leave, a shadow moved at the end of the corridor. Poirot froze, his heart steady but his mind alert. The figure was gone before he could identify it, but the soft click of a door suggested someone had retreated to their room. The manor, it seemed, was alive with nocturnal wanderings. Returning to his quarters, Poirot resolved to confront Lady Evelyn in the morning. A letter that could destroy everything was no trifling matter, and her guarded demeanour suggested she was at the heart of the mystery. But first, he needed more information. At breakfast, the atmosphere was heavier than ever. Major Thorne, red-faced and irritable, complained about the quarantine's indefinite duration. "No word from the village, no end in sight. This is a prison," he barked, slamming his fist on the table. Clara Henshaw, undeterred, leaned toward Poirot. "Monsieur, have you noticed how jumpy Felix is? He barely touched his food. And Mrs. Gray, she's been staring at that photograph on her dresser all morning. There's a story there, I'm sure of it." Poirot smiled faintly. "You are observant, Mademoiselle Henshaw, but observation must be paired with patience. The truth reveals itself to those who wait." After breakfast, Poirot sought out Lady Evelyn in her private sitting room. She was at her desk, sorting through papers, her face composed but her eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, rising, "to what do I owe this visit?" "Madam," Poirot began, his tone polite but firm, "there are matters in this house that trouble me. An intruder, a scratched drawer, a glove with a monogram, and now I hear whispers of a letter that could destroy everything. Perhaps you would care to enlighten Hercule Poirot?" Lady Evelyn's face paled, her hand gripping the desk's edge. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice wavered. "Gossip, nothing more. This quarantine has everyone on edge." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Gossip does not leave scratches on locked drawers, madame, nor does it cause cries in the night. I urge you to be candid, for secrets, when hidden too long, have a way of breaking free." Before she could respond, a shout echoed from the garden. Poirot and Lady Evelyn hurried to the window, where Grayson was gesturing urgently. "My lady," he called, "it's the groundskeeper. He's found something else." The guests gathered in the garden, where the groundskeeper, a wiry man named Tompkins, held a torn scrap of paper. "Found it near the library window, sir," he said, handing it to Poirot. The paper was crumpled, its ink smudged, but a few words were legible. "Must be kept. Secret. At all costs." Poirot's pulse quickened. The fragment was a clue, perhaps part of the letter Beatrice had overheard. He glanced at Lady Evelyn, whose face was now ashen, and at Felix, who stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the ground. The other guests murmured, their suspicion palpable. As the group dispersed, Poirot tucked the paper into his pocket, his mind alight. The midnight confession had opened a door, but the room beyond was still shrouded in shadow. The quarantine had trapped them all, but it had also trapped a secret that was growing more dangerous by the hour. Poirot knew the next move was critical, for the Manor's whispers were no longer mere echoes. They were warnings. Chapter 5. Echoes of Betrayal. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Blackthorn Manor, shrouding the estate in a veil of grey that mirrored the growing unease among its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot stood in the garden, the torn scrap of paper from the previous day tucked safely in his waistcoat pocket. Its cryptic words, "must be kept, secret, at all costs," were a tantalizing clue, a whisper of the larger secret that pulsed beneath the Manor's surface. The quarantine, now stretching into its third day, had tightened its grip, and Poirot sensed that the fragile civility among the guests was fraying. The discovery of the glove and the paper had ignited suspicion, and the echoes of betrayal were growing louder. Breakfast was a tense affair, the clink of cutlery sharp against the silence. Lady Evelyn Warrender, her composure strained, presided over the table with forced grace. Felix Warrender, her nephew, avoided eye contact, his fingers fidgeting with his napkin. Miss Clara Henshaw scribbled in her notebook, her eyes darting between the guests as if cataloguing their every move. Major Reginald Thorne, his face flushed, muttered about the incompetence of the village authorities, while Mrs. Lavinia Gray sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the photograph of the young soldier Poirot had noted earlier. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his cufflinks repeatedly, a nervous tic that Poirot found increasingly telling. Only Miss Beatrice Lyle seemed detached, her calm demeanour a stark contrast to the other's unease. Poirot sipped his coffee, his mind retracing the events of the past days. The intruder in the library, the scratched drawer, Mrs. Gray's cry, Beatrice's midnight confession, and now the torn paper. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and the little grey cells were working tirelessly to weave them together. The letter mentioned by Beatrice, one that could destroy everything, was the key, he was certain. But who held it, and what truth did it conceal? After breakfast, Poirot sought out the library, determined to examine the scratched drawer more closely. The room was as he remembered. Shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes, the air thick with the scent of old paper and wax. The desk, a massive oak affair, stood in the centre, its locked drawer bearing the telltale scratch. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, inspecting the mark. It was precise, the work of a fine tool, perhaps a letter opener or a small knife. The lock itself was intact, suggesting the attempt to open it had failed. But why this drawer, and what did it contain? As he rose, the door creaked open, and Felix Warrender entered, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice unsteady, "I didn't expect to find you here." "Nor I you, Monsieur Warrender," Poirot replied, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. "You seem drawn to this room, no? Perhaps you seek something, or wish to ensure it remains hidden." Felix flinched, his hands clenching. "I don't know what you mean. I was just looking for a book." His gaze flicked to the desk, betraying his words. Poirot smiled faintly. "A book, you say? Yet your eyes, they linger on the drawer. Tell me, what is it about this desk that troubles you?" Before Felix could respond, a shout from the hall interrupted them. It was Grayson, the butler, his usually impassive face taut with alarm. "Monsieur Poirot, my lady requests your presence at once, in the conservatory." Poirot followed, Felix trailing behind as they hurried to the glass-walled conservatory, where exotic plants thrived despite the manor's gloom. Lady Evelyn stood there, her hands clasped tightly, flanked by Clara and Dr. Caldwell. On the stone floor lay a small brass key, its surface gleaming in the filtered light. "It was found under the bench," Lady Evelyn said, her voice tight. "Tompkins, the groundskeeper, discovered it while sweeping. It's not one of ours." Poirot picked up the key, turning it over in his gloved hands. It was small, ornate, with a delicate filigree pattern, clearly meant for a specific lock. "Most curious," he murmured. "This key, it is no ordinary thing. It belongs to something of importance. Perhaps the drawer in the library?" Lady Evelyn's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Clara, however, was quick to speak. "That's no coincidence, Monsieur Poirot. First the glove, then the paper, now a key. Someone's trying to open that drawer, or make us think they are." Dr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Let's not jump to conclusions. It could belong to anything, a jewellery box, a diary. We're all on edge because of this blasted quarantine." Poirot's gaze lingered on Caldwell. "Indeed, Monsieur le Docteur, but edges, they sharpen the truth. This key will lead us somewhere, I am certain." As the group dispersed, Poirot returned to the library, the key in his pocket. He tried it in the drawer's lock. It fit perfectly but did not turn. The lock was jammed, or the key was a decoy. His frustration was tempered by a growing certainty. Someone in the manor was orchestrating these discoveries, planting clues to obscure the truth. That afternoon, Poirot joined Major Thorne for a walk in the garden, hoping to probe the man's bluster. "Major," he began, "the glove with your initials, it troubles me. You say it is not yours, yet it appears at a most convenient moment." Thorne's face reddened. "I told you it's not mine. Someone's playing a game, Poirot, and I don't like being the pawn." His limp was more pronounced, and Poirot noted the way he gripped his cane, as if anchoring himself against a storm. "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but games have players, and players have motives. What is yours, Major?" Thorne stopped, his eyes narrowing. "You're a clever man, Poirot, but you're barking up the wrong tree. I've no secrets here, unlike some." He gestured vaguely toward the manor, where Mrs. Gray stood at a window, watching them. The day wore on, each guest retreating into their own thoughts. Poirot observed them closely. Clara's relentless questions, Beatrice's quiet watchfulness, Felix's growing agitation. At dinner, the tension was palpable, the conversation stilted. Lady Evelyn announced that a telegram had arrived, confirming the quarantine would last at least another week. Groans met the news, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere. The key, the paper, the glove, they were not random. They were signals, pointing to a betrayal that had yet to fully surface. That night, as Poirot sat in his room, a soft rustling came from the corridor. Slipping to the door, he peered out, catching a glimpse of Mrs. Gray, her black mourning dress blending into the shadows. She moved toward the library, a small bundle in her hands. Poirot followed, his steps silent, his cane tucked under his shoe. Arm in the library, Mrs. Gray knelt by the desk, her fingers trembling as she tried the drawer. She froze as Poirot stepped into the light. "Madame Gray," he said softly, "you seek something, no? Perhaps the letter that could destroy everything?" She gasped, dropping the bundle, a bundle of old letters tied with string. "Monsieur Poirot, I didn't mean—" Her voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not what you think. These are mine, personal. But I heard them talking about a letter, and I thought, perhaps it's connected to my husband." Poirot's eyes softened, but his mind was sharp. "Your husband, madame? The soldier in the photograph? Tell me, what secret do you fear?" Mrs. Gray hesitated, then whispered, "He didn't die in the war, as I told everyone. He disappeared. There were rumors, shameful ones. I came here to find answers, but now I'm afraid." Before Poirot could press further, a crash echoed from the hall, followed by a scream. The manor was alive with secrets, and the echoes of betrayal were no longer whispers. They were cries, demanding to be heard. Chapter 6. The Locked Room Enigma. The scream that pierced the night sent a shiver through Blackthorn Manor, its echo reverberating down the darkened corridors. Hercule Poirot, standing in the library with Mrs. Lavinia Gray, reacted with the swiftness of a man accustomed to crisis. The bundle of letters she had dropped lay forgotten as he urged her to follow him. "Vite, madame! We must discover the source of this distress." His cane tapped urgently as they hurried toward the sound, which had come from the east wing. The manor's guests were already converging in the hallway, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Lady Evelyn Warrender, her silk robe hastily tied, stood at the forefront, her composure fraying. "It came from Dr. Caldwell's room," she exclaimed, pointing to a heavy oak door at the end of the corridor. Felix Warrender, pale and dishevelled, hovered nearby, while Miss Clara Henshaw clutched her notebook, her eyes wide. Major Reginald Thorne, his cane gripped tightly, muttered about damned disturbances, and Miss Beatrice Lyle lingered in the shadows, her expression unreadable. Poirot approached the door, his sharp eyes noting its sturdy lock and the absence of any visible damage. He knocked sharply. "Monsieur le Docteur, it is Hercule Poirot. Open the door, s'il vous plaît." Silence answered, broken only by the distant moan of the wind outside. He tried the handle. Locked. Grayson, the butler, appeared with a ring of keys, his face ashen. "This one, sir," he said, selecting a key with trembling hands. The lock clicked, and the door swung open to reveal a scene that froze the gathered company. Dr. Simon Caldwell lay slumped across his bed, his face contorted in a grimace of pain, his glasses askew on the floor. A small vial, its contents spilled, rested on the nightstand beside a half-empty glass of water. The room's single window was bolted shut from the inside, and the door, as Poirot had confirmed, had been locked. The air carried a faint bitter odour, unfamiliar yet ominous. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers carefully examining the scene. "Monsieur le Docteur is dead," he announced, his voice steady but grave. "And it is no natural death, I fear. This vial, it suggests poison." A gasp rippled through the group. Clara Henshaw pushed forward, her notebook forgotten. "Poison? But how? The door was locked, the window bolted. No one could have entered." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, mademoiselle. We are faced with a locked room enigma, a puzzle most intriguing. but rest assured, Hercule Poirot will unravel it." Lady Evelyn clutched her pearls, her voice trembling. "This is monstrous! A murder here under my roof? We must contact the authorities at once." "Impossible, madame," Grayson interjected. "The quarantine forbids it. No one may leave or enter until the fever is contained." Poirot's mind was already at work, cataloguing details. The vial bore no label, but its contents suggested a deliberate act. The locked door and bolted window ruled out an external intruder, or so it seemed. He turned to the guests, his gaze piercing. "Who was the last to see Dr. Caldwell alive?" Felix spoke first, his voice unsteady. "I saw him after dinner, in the drawing-room. He said he was tired and retired early, around 9 o'clock, Clara nodded. "I spoke with him briefly before that. He was anxious about the quarantine, said he needed to check his medical bag." Her eyes narrowed. "He was fidgeting with his cufflinks as usual." Poirot filed away the information, his attention returning to the room. He examined the nightstand, noting a faint ring of moisture around the glass, as if it had been moved recently. Under the bed he found a single thread, black, like Mrs. Gray's morning dress. He pocketed it discreetly, his suspicions deepening. "Grayson," Poirot said, "please ensure this room is sealed until I can investigate further, and summon the staff. I must know who had access to this wing tonight." As the butler hurried off, Poirot addressed the group. "Mes amis, this is a grave matter. A man is dead, and one among us is responsible. I urge you to speak freely, for secrets they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." The guests dispersed, their faces pale, their whispers frantic. Poirot remained in the room, his little grey cells humming. The locked room was a classic conundrum, but he knew that even the impossible had a solution. The vial, the thread, the locked door, they were pieces of a puzzle, and he would fit them together. Later, in the drawing-room, Poirot gathered the guests to discuss the tragedy. Major Thorne, his bluster subdued, suggested foul play by an outsider. "Some village ruffian sneaking in before the quarantine. That glove proves it." Poirot shook his head. "No, Major. The glove, the paper, the key, these are distractions perhaps. But this murder, it is intimate. It is born of secrets within these walls." Mrs. Gray, her eyes red-rimmed, clutched her handkerchief. "Dr. Caldwell was kind to me. He listened when I spoke of my husband. Why would anyone—" Her voice broke, and Poirot noted the tremor in her hands. Clara, ever the journalist, pressed forward. "Monsieur Poirot, what about the letter Beatrice mentioned? Could it be connected? Caldwell was nervous. Maybe he knew too much." Beatrice shot Clara a sharp look, but said nothing. Lady Evelyn, however, stiffened. "Enough of this talk of letters. It's nonsense, fueling paranoia. We're all trapped here, and now this tragedy." Poirot's gaze lingered on Lady Evelyn. Her denial was too vehement, her fear too palpable. The letter, he suspected, was the key to both the murder and the manor's secrets. But where was it, and who had sought to silence Caldwell? As the night wore on, Poirot interviewed the staff. Eliza, the maid who had screamed in the library, admitted to delivering a tray of tea to Caldwell's room at 8:30. "He was alive then, sir," she said, trembling. "He thanked me and locked the door behind me." Tompkins, the groundskeeper, confirmed he had patrolled the east wing earlier, but saw nothing unusual. Yet Poirot noted the man's evasive glance, as if he feared revealing too much. Returning to his room, Poirot sat at his desk, the silver cigarette case he had found, engraved with SC before him. It was Caldwell's, dropped in haste, perhaps as he fled from danger. Or had he been the danger? The black thread, the vial, the locked room, all pointed to a betrayal that had turned deadly. As the manor slept, Poirot's mind did not rest. The locked room enigma was a challenge, but it was also a revelation. Someone had planned this murder with care, exploiting the quarantine's isolation. The echoes of betrayal were now screams, and Poirot knew the next clue would bring him closer to the truth, or to danger. Chapter 7. Veils of Deception. The air in Blackthorn Manor was thick with suspicion, as if the very walls absorbed the mistrust that simmered among its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, the morning light filtering through heavy drapes, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Dr. Simon Caldwell's murder in a locked room had shattered the fragile civility of the quarantine, and the discovery of the vial, the black thread, and the cryptic scrap of paper had only deepened the mystery. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, piecing together the clues. The scratched drawer, the monogrammed glove, the ornate key, and now a poison that had silenced a man who perhaps knew too much. The guests gathered reluctantly, their faces etched with fear and fatigue. Lady Evelyn Warrender, her elegance strained, sat rigidly, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Felix Warrender, her nephew, paced near the fireplace, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Miss Clara Henshaw, notebook in hand, watched the room like a hawk, while Major Reginald Thorne leaned heavily on his cane, his bluster subdued. Mrs. Lavinia Gray clutched her handkerchief, her gaze distant, and Miss Beatrice Lyle sat apart, her calm demeanour a stark contrast to the other's agitation. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. Mes amis, the death of Dr. Caldwell is no accident. It is murder, planned with precision. The locked room, the poison, these are the work of someone among us. I ask you now, what do you know of the doctor's final hours? Speak, for the truth cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. A tense silence followed, broken by Clara's sharp voice. He was nervous yesterday, she said. Kept checking his medical bag, muttering about the quarantine. I asked if he'd heard from his London colleagues, but he brushed me off. He knew something, I'm sure of it. Major Thorne snorted. Knew something? The man was a bundle of nerves. Probably poisoned himself by mistake, mixing up his own concoctions. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No, Major. The vial was no accident. It was placed deliberately, and the room locked to create the illusion of impossibility. But illusions, they can be pierced. Mrs. Gray's voice trembled as she spoke. Dr. Caldwell was kind to me. He listened when I spoke of my husband's disappearance. He said he'd heard rumours in medical circles about a scandal. Could that be why? Her words trailed off, her eyes brimming with tears. Poirot noted her hesitation, filing it away. A scandal tied to her husband, another thread in the tapestry. He turned to Lady Evelyn. Madam, you have been most reticent about the letter mentioned by Mademoiselle Lyle. A letter that could destroy everything. Does it connect to Dr. Caldwell's death? Lady Evelyn's face paled, her fingers tightening around her pearls. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, there's no such letter. This talk is dangerous nonsense, stirring up panic. Felix shot her a glance, his jaw tight. Aunt, perhaps it's time. He stopped abruptly as Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed with warning. Poirot's moustache twitched. Time for what, Monsieur Warrender? To reveal what you and your aunt discussed in the library? Or what you sought in that scratched drawer? Before Felix could respond, Grayson entered, his face grim. Monsieur Poirot, there's something you should see. In the servants' quarters. A discovery. The group followed Grayson to a narrow staircase leading to the servants' wing. In a small, cluttered storeroom, hidden behind a stack of linens, was a leather satchel, its clasp broken. Inside were medical supplies, vials, syringes, and a small notebook in Dr. Caldwell's handwriting. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes scanning. The cryptic entries: Patient X, symptoms worsening, must confirm source, Warrender connection. Poirot's pulse quickened. This notebook, it suggests Dr. Caldwell was investigating something or someone. Perhaps the fever in the village is no mere outbreak. Clara leaned over his shoulder. Patient X? That sounds like a code. Was he treating someone here, secretly? Lady Evelyn's voice was sharp. Preposterous! Dr. Caldwell was a guest, not a physician in residence. This is mere speculation. But Poirot's mind was racing. The notebook, the vial, the letter, they were linked, he was certain. He instructed Grayson to secure the satchel and returned to the drawing room, where he began questioning the guests individually, peeling back their veils of deception. First was Major Thorne, whose bluster masked unease. I barely spoke to Caldwell, he insisted. The man was always fidgeting, asking questions about my military days. Nosy, if you ask me. Poirot noted the Major's limp, more pronounced under scrutiny, and the way he avoided mentioning the glove with his initials. Next was Mrs. Gray, her voice barely above a whisper. I told Dr. Caldwell about my husband's disappearance, she admitted. He said he'd heard of a doctor involved in unethical experiments during the war. I thought it might explain why my husband vanished. Her hands trembled, and Poirot saw genuine fear in her eyes. Clara was eager to talk, her journalist's instincts sharp. Caldwell was digging into something, she said. He asked me about old newspaper archives, scandals involving the Warrender family. I didn't have answers, but he was obsessed. Beatrice Lyle, questioned last, was guarded but direct. I saw Caldwell in the library 2 nights ago, looking at that desk. He didn't see me, but he was trying to open the drawer. When Felix came in, he left quickly. Her words confirmed Poirot's suspicions. Caldwell had been close to uncovering the letter. As evening fell, Poirot returned to the library, the ornate key from the conservatory in his pocket. He tried it again in the drawer's lock, but it still refused to turn. Frustrated, he examined the desk's underside, finding a faint seam, a hidden compartment. With a small tool from his pocket, he pried it open, revealing a single sheet of paper, folded tightly. It was not the letter, but a map, crudely drawn, marking a location in the manor's grounds labelled Vault. Poirot's heart raced. The vault, another secret, perhaps the hiding place of the letter. He tucked the map away, determined to investigate at first light. But as he left the library, a shadow moved in the corridor, too quick to identify. The manor was alive with deception, and Poirot knew the killer was watching, waiting for his next move. At dinner, the tension was unbearable. Felix barely spoke, his eyes darting to Lady Evelyn. Clara's questions grew bolder, earning sharp rebukes from Major Thorne. Mrs. Gray sat in silence, her grief palpable, while Beatrice watched the room with quiet intensity. Poirot observed them all, his mind weaving connections. The notebook, the map, the poison, each was a veil, hiding a truth that was dangerously close to surfacing. As the guests retired, Poirot lingered in the hall, his thoughts on the vault. The murder of Dr. Caldwell was no isolated act. It was a desperate attempt to protect a secret. The veils of deception were thinning, and Poirot knew the next revelation would bring him face to face with the killer, or with danger. Chapter 8. The Hidden Diary. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor with a pale, reluctant light, as if the sun itself hesitated to illuminate the secrets festering within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood at his window, the crudely drawn map from the library's hidden compartment tucked securely in his waistcoat. The map, marking a vault somewhere on the manor's grounds, was a tantalizing clue, one that promised to unlock the mystery of Dr. Simon Caldwell's murder and the elusive letter that could destroy everything. The quarantine, now in its 4th day, had transformed the manor into a pressure cooker, and Poirot sensed the truth was nearing a boiling point. The breakfast table was a study in strange silence. Lady Evelyn Warrender, her face drawn, presided with a brittle smile, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Felix Warrender, her nephew, picked at his food, his agitation palpable. Miss Clara Henshaw, ever the journalist, scribbled in her notebook, her gaze flitting between the guests. Major Reginald Thorne, his temper frayed, muttered about the quarantine's absurdity, while Mrs. Lavinia Gray clutched her handkerchief, her grief a quiet undercurrent. Miss Beatrice Lyle, as always, observed in silence, her calm exterior betraying nothing. Poirot's mind was elsewhere, replaying the clues: the scratched drawer, the monogrammed glove, the ornate key, the torn paper, the poisoned vial, the black thread, and now the map. Dr. Caldwell's notebook, with its cryptic reference to patient X and a Warrender connection, suggested he had been close to uncovering a secret, one worth killing for. The map's vault was the next step, but Poirot knew he must tread carefully. The killer was among them, watching his every move. After breakfast, Poirot slipped away to the garden, the map guiding him toward a secluded corner near an ancient yew tree. The air was damp, the ground soft from the recent storm. He scanned the area, his sharp eyes catching a faint outline in the earth. A stone slab, partially hidden by moss. Kneeling, he brushed away the overgrowth, revealing a rusted iron ring embedded in the stone. A trapdoor, perhaps leading to the vault. His pulse quickened, but he hesitated. The manor was alive with eyes, and he could not risk being seen. Returning to the house, Poirot sought out Grayson, the butler, whose impassive demeanour had begun to crack under the strain of the murder. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, "this manor, it holds many secrets, no? A vault, perhaps, hidden in the grounds?" Grayson's eyes flickered with unease. "I know of no vault, sir. The manor is old, full of forgotten corners, but I've never heard of such a thing." His voice was steady, but his hands betrayed a slight tremor. Poirot nodded, unconvinced. "Merci, Grayson. But secrets, they have a way of revealing themselves." In the drawing room, Poirot found Clara Henshaw poring over her notes. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, looking up, "I've been thinking about Caldwell's notebook. Patient X, could it be someone in the village tied to this fever, or someone here, in the manor?" "A perceptive question, mademoiselle," Poirot replied. "Dr. Caldwell was investigating something, perhaps a medical scandal, as Madame Gray suggested. But we must find the letter he sought. It is the key." Clara's eyes gleamed. "What about that drawer in the library? You said the key didn't work. Maybe there's another way to open it." Poirot smiled faintly. "You think like a detective, mademoiselle. Come, let us investigate." In the library, Poirot examined the desk once more, the ornate key still useless in the jammed lock. Clara watched as he ran his fingers along the desk's edges, searching for another hidden compartment. His persistence was rewarded when a panel clicked open beneath the desktop, revealing a small, leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age. Poirot's heart raced as he opened it, recognizing Lady Evelyn's elegant script. The diary was not the letter, but its entries were revealing. Dated 20 years prior, They described a family scandal. A Warrender ancestor, Dr. Edmund Warrender, had conducted unethical medical experiments during the Great War, testing dangerous treatments on soldiers. One entry read, "Edmund's shame must never see the light. The letter he wrote, confessing all, is hidden where none will find it. If it surfaces, the family is ruined." Poirot closed the diary, his mind ablaze. The letter, then, was Edmund Warrender's confession, a document that could destroy the family's reputation. Had Caldwell discovered it? Was that why he was killed? As Poirot and Clara discussed the find, a shadow passed the library door. Felix Warrender stood there, his face pale. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "That's private property." Poirot held up the diary, his gaze steady. "Monsieur Warrender, this diary speaks of a letter, a confession that could ruin your family. Dr. Caldwell, he knew of it, no? Is that why he died?" Felix's hands clenched. "I don't know what you're talking about. You've no right to pry." He stormed out, but not before Poirot saw fear in his eyes. Clara whispered, "He's hiding something, and Lady Evelyn, she's been protecting him from the start." Poirot nodded. "Oui, mademoiselle. The veils are lifting, but the truth remains obscured. We must find the vault and the letter." That afternoon, Poirot returned to the garden, ensuring he was alone. He lifted the stone slab, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. With a pocket torch, he navigated the steps, finding a small, damp chamber lined with rusted metal boxes. One bore the Warrender crest, but it was locked, its keyhole matching the ornate key from the conservatory. To his frustration, the key still did not turn, the lock was corroded. As he emerged, he heard a rustle in the bushes. Spinning around, he caught a glimpse of Major Thorne, his cane glinting in the sunlight. "Major," Poirot called, "you take an interest in this corner of the garden, no?" Thorne's face reddened. "Just stretching my legs, Poirot, nothing more." But his limp was pronounced, and Poirot noted the mud on his boots, fresh as if he'd been digging. At dinner, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Mrs. Gray, her voice breaking, spoke of her husband's connection to Dr. Edmund Warrender. "He served under him in the war," she said. "He never spoke of it, but I found letters, hints of experiments gone wrong. I think he was ashamed." Lady Evelyn's face was a mask of ice. "Enough, Lavinia. These are old wounds, best left alone." But Poirot pressed on. "Madame, the diary I found, it speaks of your ancestor's shame. A letter hidden in a vault. Dr. Caldwell sought it, and now he is dead. Will you not speak the truth?" The room fell silent, all eyes on Lady Evelyn. She rose, her voice trembling. "You overstep, Monsieur Poirot. This is my home, and I will not have it torn apart by your accusations." She swept out, leaving the guests in stunned silence. As Poirot retired to his room, he felt the weight of the diary and the map in his pocket. The hidden diary had revealed a motive, but the letter remained out of reach. The vault held the key, but so did the killer who was growing desperate. The Manor's secrets were no longer hidden, they were screaming to be found, and Poirot knew the next move would be perilous. Chapter 9. Confrontation in the Storm. The air in Blackthorn Manor crackled with tension, as if the very walls anticipated the storm that was gathering both outside and within. Hercule Poirot stood by his window, the diary and map from the library burning a metaphorical hole in his waistcoat pocket. The revelation of Dr. Edmund Warrender's scandalous experiments, hinted at in Lady Evelyn's diary, had brought the mystery into sharp focus. The letter, his confession, hidden in the vault, was the key to Dr. Simon Caldwell's murder, and Poirot was certain it was close. The quarantine, now in its 5th day, had trapped the killer among them, and the little grey cells were poised for the final unravelling. As evening descended, a new storm rolled in, its thunder shaking the manor's ancient foundations. The guests gathered in the drawing-room, their faces drawn, their nerves frayed by the mounting clues. The scratched drawer, the monogrammed glove, the ornate key, the torn paper, the poisoned vial, the black thread, Dr. Caldwell's notebook, and now the diary. Poirot observed them closely. Lady Evelyn's forced composure, Felix Warrender's restless pacing, Miss Clara Henshaw's relentless scribbling, Major Reginald Thorne's sullen silence, Mrs. Lavinia Gray's quiet grief, and Miss Beatrice Lyle's watchful calm. Each was a player in this deadly drama, and the stage was set for a confrontation. Poirot began, his voice cutting through the storm's rumble. Mes amis, we stand at a crossroads. Dr. Caldwell was murdered to protect a secret, a letter written by Dr. Edmund Warrender, confessing to experiments that shamed this family. This letter, hidden in a vault, was what he sought. One of you knows its location. One of you killed to keep it hidden. Lady Evelyn's face paled, her hands gripping her chair. Monsieur Poirot, you go too far. This is speculation, not proof. You distress my guests with these accusations. Poirot's eyes gleamed. No, madame. The diary I found. It speaks of your ancestors' shame. The map points to a vault. Dr. Caldwell's notebook mentions a Warrender connection. These are not speculations, they are facts, and facts they lead to truth. Felix Warrender stepped forward, his voice shaking. Enough, Poirot! You're tearing this family apart. Yes, there's a letter, but it's old, irrelevant. Caldwell was meddling, stirring up trouble. Maybe he deserved. Felix, Lady Evelyn snapped, her voice like a whip. Be silent! But Poirot pounced. Deserved what, Monsieur Warrender? To die? You knew of the letter, no? You feared its discovery. Did you poison Dr. Caldwell to protect your family's name? Felix's face crumpled, his hands trembling. I didn't kill him. I swear it. I only wanted to find the letter, to destroy it before anyone else could. Clara Henshaw's pen paused, her eyes wide. So you admit you were in the library tampering with that drawer? The scratch? It was you? Before Felix could respond, a deafening crash of thunder shook the manor, followed by a scream from the hall. The group rushed out, finding Eliza, the maid, crumpled at the foot of the stairs, a lantern shattered beside her. Someone pushed me, she gasped, clutching her arm. I saw them, a shadow, running toward the garden. Poirot's mind raced. The killer was moving, desperate to cover their tracks. Vite, he commanded, to the garden, the vault. It is there we will find answers. The storm raged as the group, led by Poirot, braved the rain-soaked grounds. Guided by the map, they reached the yew tree, where the stone slab lay hidden. Major Thorne, his limp pronounced, lagged behind, while Mrs. Gray clung to Beatrice for support. Clara, undeterred by the downpour, stayed close to Poirot, her notebook tucked inside her coat. With Grayson's help, Poirot lifted the slab, revealing the narrow staircase to the vault. The group descended, their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the damp stone walls. At the bottom, the rusted metal box with the Warrender crest gleamed in the flickering light. Poirot tried the ornate key once more, but the corroded lock refused to yield. "Stand back," Major Thorne barked, producing a small crowbar from his coat. With surprising strength, he pried open the box, revealing a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth. Poirot carefully unwrapped them, his heart pounding as he found the letter, a single sheet, yellowed with age, in Dr. Edmund Warrender's hand. He read aloud, his voice steady despite the storm's roar. To whom it may concern, I confess to my crimes in 1917. Under the guise of medical research, I tested experimental treatments on soldiers, causing untold suffering. One man, Captain Thomas Gray, discovered my actions and threatened exposure. I ensured his silence, but the shame haunts me. This letter is my confession, hidden to protect my family." Mrs. Gray gasped, her hands covering her mouth. "Thomas, my husband, he didn't disappear. He was silenced." Tears streamed down her face as she turned to Lady Evelyn. "You knew, didn't you? You've been hiding this all along." Lady Evelyn's composure shattered. I suspected," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Edmund was my grandfather. I found the diary years ago, learned of the letter. I couldn't let it destroy us." Poirot's gaze shifted to Felix. "And you, Monsieur Warrender? You searched for this letter, no? But did you kill to protect it?" Felix shook his head frantically. "No, I swear, I only wanted to burn it. I didn't touch Caldwell." A sudden movement caught Poirot's eye. Major Thorne stepping back, his cane slipping in the wet stone. Poirot's voice was sharp. "Major, you were quick to open the box, and the glove, with your initials, found near the library window. You knew of the vault, no? You served with Captain Gray, did you not?" Thorne's face darkened. "What are you implying, Poirot? I'm no murderer." But Clara interjected, her voice triumphant. "You lied about your limp, Major. I saw you in the garden, moving without it. You've been playing the invalid, but you're strong enough to climb through a window, or to push a maid down the stairs." Thorne's eyes blazed, but before he could respond, Beatrice spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Monsieur Poirot, I saw the Major near Caldwell's room the night he died. He was carrying a small case, medical, I thought." Poirot's mind clicked into place. "The vial of poison, Major. You took it from Caldwell's bag, no? You knew of his investigation into the Warrender scandal. Perhaps because you were complicit in Captain Gray's fate, you silenced Caldwell to protect your own secret." Thorne lunged, his crowbar raised, but Felix and Grayson seized him, pinning him against the wall. The storm raged above, its thunder drowning out Thorne's curses. Poirot stood firm, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The confrontation is over, Major. The letter has spoken, and your actions have betrayed you." As the group restrained Thorne, Poirot clutched the letter, its words a testament to a long-buried crime. The vault had yielded its secret, but the storm had brought the truth to light. One final step remained, to unveil the full truth before the manor's inhabitants. Chapter 10. The Unveiling of Truth. The storm had spent its fury, leaving Blackthorn Manor bathed in an eerie calm, as dawn broke on the 6th day of the quarantine. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, the letter of Dr. Edmund Warrender, confessing to his wartime crimes, clutched in his gloved hand. The events of the previous night, culminating in Major Reginald Thorne's desperate lunge in the vault, had brought the mystery to its climax. Yet, Poirot knew, the final act required clarity, precision, and the unveiling of the truth before the assembled guests. The little grey cells had worked tirelessly, weaving together the threads of the scratched drawer, the monogrammed glove, the ornate key, the torn paper, the poisoned vial, the black thread, Dr. Simon Caldwell's notebook, the hidden diary, and the map to the vault. Now, it was time to lay bare the killer's motives and methods. The guests gathered reluctantly, their faces etched with exhaustion and dread. Lady Evelyn Warrender sat rigidly, her elegance marred by the strain of secrets exposed. Felix Warrender, her nephew, stood near the fireplace, his eyes hollow with guilt. Miss Clara Henshaw, notebook in hand, watched eagerly, sensing a story's resolution. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, her grief now mingled with resolve, clutched the photograph of her husband, Captain Thomas Gray. Miss Beatrice Lyle remained composed, her gaze steady, while Major Thorne, restrained by Grayson and Tompkins, glared defiantly from a corner, his cane confiscated. Poirot stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "Mes amis," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "we have endured a storm, both of nature and of human deceit. Dr. Simon Caldwell was murdered, poisoned in a locked room, to protect a secret that has haunted this manor for decades. Today, Hercule Poirot will unveil the truth, for no crime can escape the little grey cells." He held up the letter, its yellowed pages a silent witness. "This is the confession of Dr. Edmund Warrender, written in 1917. He admitted to conducting unethical experiments on soldiers, causing suffering and death. One man, Captain Thomas Gray, discovered this crime and threatened to expose it. To silence him, Doctor, Warrender ensured his disappearance, a tragedy that has haunted Madame Gray for years." Mrs. Gray's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded, urging Poirot to continue. "Dr. Caldwell," Poirot went on, "came to this manor seeking the truth. His notebook spoke of Patient X and a Warrender connection. He suspected the letter's existence, perhaps through medical circles or rumours tied to Captain Gray. He searched the library, leaving a scratch on the drawer, but he grew too close to the truth. And so he was silenced." Poirot turned to Major Thorne, whose face was a mask of fury. "Major, you served with Captain Gray in the war. You knew of Dr. Warrender's experiments, no? Perhaps you aided him, or perhaps you profited from his silence. When Dr. Caldwell began asking questions, you feared exposure. The glove with your initials, found near the library window, it was yours, dropped deliberately to mislead us." Thorne's voice was a growl. "Lies! I told you, that glove isn't mine." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Yet you moved with agility in the garden, Major, despite your supposed limp. You climbed through the library window, planting the glove to suggest an intruder. But the true clue was the poison. You took a vial from Dr. Caldwell's medical bag, which you accessed during your strolls in the East Wing. You slipped it into his water, knowing he would drink before bed. The locked room, a simple trick. You used a duplicate key, later discarded as the ornate key found in the conservatory, to lock the door after the deed." Clara gasped, her pen flying across her notebook. "But the window was bolted from the inside. How could anyone enter?" Poirot smiled faintly. "A classic misdirection, mademoiselle. The window was never opened. The killer entered through the door, using the duplicate key, and locked it behind them. The bolted window was merely a detail to confuse us, to make the crime appear impossible." He turned to Lady Evelyn, whose face was ashen. "Madam, you knew of the letter hidden by your grandfather. You protected it to preserve the Warrender name. You suspected Dr. Caldwell's intentions, but you did not kill him. Your fear was real, but your silence enabled the crime." Lady Evelyn's voice trembled. I only wanted to protect my family. The shame of Edmund's actions, it would have ruined us." Felix stepped forward, his voice breaking. "I tried to find the letter, Monsieur Poirot. I scratched the drawer, hoping to destroy it before anyone else could. But I didn't kill Caldwell. I swear it." Poirot nodded. "I believe you, Monsieur Warrender. Your fear was of scandal, not of murder. But you, Major Thorne, had more to lose. Your connection to Captain Gray's disappearance, your role in the experiments. It was you Dr. Caldwell suspected. His notebook entries, his questions about your military days, they threatened to expose you. And so you acted." Thorne struggled against his restraints, his voice hoarse. "You have no proof, Poirot. This is all conjecture." Poirot produced the black thread from his pocket. "This, Major, was found under Dr. Caldwell's bed. It matches your coat, which you wore the night you entered his room. And the cigarette case, engraved with SC, dropped in your haste. It was not Caldwell's, but yours, borrowed and never returned. You used it to gain his trust, perhaps offering him a cigarette to distract him while you tampered with his water." Mrs. Gray spoke, her voice steady despite her tears. "You knew my husband, Major. You knew what Dr. Warrender did to him. Did you help silence him too?" Thorne's defiance crumbled, his shoulders sagging. I followed orders. Warrender promised protection, wealth. Gray was a threat. I didn't kill him, but I looked the other way." The room fell silent, the weight of his confession heavy. Poirot continued. "The letter, hidden in the vault, was your final fear, Major. You pushed Eliza down the stairs to stop her from revealing your movements. But the truth, it cannot be silenced." Lady Evelyn rose, her voice shaking. "Monsieur Poirot, what now? The quarantine traps us all, even the guilty." Poirot's eyes softened. "The authorities will be informed, madame, once the quarantine lifts. Major Thorne will face justice, and Captain Gray's memory will be honoured. The letter, it will be handled with discretion, to spare further pain." As the guests dispersed, Clara approached Poirot, her eyes bright. "You've done it, monsieur. A story for the ages. May I write it?" Poirot smiled. "With care, mademoiselle. The truth is a delicate thing." In his room, Poirot sat, the letter and diary before him. The Manor's secrets were unveiled, the killer unmasked. The quarantine had been a crucible, forging truth from deception. As the sun rose higher, Poirot's little grey cells rested, satisfied that order had been restored, at least until the next mystery called.